Okay, Bradley. I want to talk first about the pivot. So you got the V1 analysis, kind of comparing you to Brooks Koepka. And the first big piece we got attacking your movement is a little bit of the weight shift and a little bit of the pivot of how we're creating our backstroke. That's ultimately causing a little knock-on effect that creates our issues for our club coming in later. So currently, we've got a little noodle here. You could do this with an alignment rod on the ground if you're practicing on the grass. But what we're going to have here is a noodle that's pretty close to our lead hip. Because currently what we have for you is in takeaway, we discussed in that V1 analysis, you got a big shift with the hips forward as the head starts drifting backwards. So basically what that is you're staying in the forward bend we have it addressed and just sort of giving me a spin. You're staying in forward bend there. It's going to shift the pelvis forward, going to kick the head backwards. From this position, club head ends up getting way too far inside. Our body's not in the position to actually rotate to get that back out to the golf ball. So we end up seeing the right arm lengthen a little bit. We see an inward to outward path. We see the club that's certainly too close and too shallow to the ground too early. And that creates a lot of inconsistent strikes and a lot of probably an inability to keep the loft on the ball the way that we'd like to do. Definitely some directional issues. I imagine you hit a lot of shots to the right or weak to the right. So if we've got this noodle or alignment rod pretty close to our hip here, and get that golf ball out of the way for a moment, what we're going to see is that as we make this pivot for the backstroke, we're going to see a little bit more of the head staying forward as we rotate the pelvis versus staying in forward bend and spinning. This is definitely what we see you doing. We see the head going backwards a significant amount. We're going to make a backstroke to where I don't run the pelvis into that noodle or the alignment rod, and I actually keep the head forward. So what you're certainly going to feel is more pressure in the left foot as we make the backstroke. When we're staying in forward bend and just spinning, our center of mass gets too far back and we're over our right foot. Very difficult at that point to be forward enough to create the angle of attack that we need to create consistent contact and pitch shots. So that's the first thing we've got to work on. In your backstroke, we've got to see that pelvis turning, not shifting forward. So the pelvis is going to turn and the head stays forward. Your initial feel might be that you're actually leaning towards the target a little bit, which would be the opposite of being in a two-dimensional view, leaning away from the target. So as you're making your backstrokes, you're wanting to see much more of, from that view, the zipper and the buttons lining up versus seeing them get not stacked up as much anymore. Because from that position, it makes it really hard to deliver the club the way that we'd like. Again, I would be willing to bet we'd probably see that in your full swing. Also, probably not the first time you've heard that about your pivot. From that position, once we're able to create a much more of a stacked up vertical position with our rib cage and our pelvis where we've rotated, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to rotate on the way forward. So from the down the line view, what we'd really like to see you working on, okay, once we got this pivot, instead of seeing the club getting way behind the hands, we'd like to certainly see a little bit more of that club working a little bit more vertically instead of seeing it spin behind us so far. So that goes along with the fact that if I've pivoted correctly, it's a little bit easier to see that club work upward. We're going to see that out of all of our good pitchers and chippers. That club is going to be somewhere around the hand line when it's parallel to the ground. See some guys a little outside, a little inside, depending on what the rest of their movement is. But I don't see any good pitchers and chippers of the golf ball where that club head gets significantly behind us where we see it in your movement. So we got two pieces we're working on. We need to see that pivot happen correctly where there's certainly some pressure in the left foot and the pelvis and the rib cage are still stacked up together. From that position, as the club's a little bit more vertical, you're going to feel like that's steeper, and it certainly needs to be steeper. We have an issue currently with it being too shallow and into out. As we see in Brooks's video, we see a clear picture that club is striking the golf ball and working left. We're in a little bit of a fade fashion there. Guarantees his angle of attack so he can hit the ground hard, but he's hitting the ground with a bounce, so he's actually able to produce a lot of spin loft, steeper angle of attack, and a lot of loft, slows the golf ball down, and spins it. So as we're hitting these shots, we've got our pivot correct. We're going to see that club a little bit more vertical, and we're going to get that from this movement, a little bit of what we call radial deviation or hinge up. We need a tiny bit of that to see the club get a little bit more vertical instead of staying low and behind us. So we've got a better pivot, we've got a little bit of hinge up. From that position, once we're ready to hit the golf ball there, and we're going to have a little bit of a fade bias, right? We line that shaft back up, and by that I mean we're getting rid of our shaft link. We're sort of throwing that club head back under the grip to create our loft. The third piece that I'm going to throw in there to help us with the pivot forward, because that's going to be new for you, is we hit some of these shots. After we've got the pivot correct, we've got that club head a little bit higher in the backstroke, I'm going to have you throw a towel or a glove or something under the lead arm as we do that, so that the forward stroke ends up being that left arm has to stay soft. It has to start folding to catch the loft. Instead of seeing both those arms get long and come off the body as we're trying to scoop that golf ball in the air, it's going to force our rotation around to the left. It's going to limit how far that hand path can go forward, which is how we actually start creating our loft and our softness of the golf ball. So if we can get a slightly out to in path, okay, slightly out to in path, along with a shorter radius of the hand path running out this way, so we're going to have that left arm a little more connected to the body, we start seeing the arms fold up and catch my club a little bit sooner, and I get a little bit more loft to the golf ball, and consequently more bounce to the ground when I'm in that scenario. When I'm forced to lengthen my arms to hit this golf ball, it's hard for me to actually keep the bounce on the ground and the loft on the ball, and it's certainly going to push that path outward and require closing of the face. So we can eliminate a lot of those quick last minute things we've got to do when we hit it if we'll structure our backstroke properly. So we've got a better pivot, we've got the club a little bit more in the air, and downstroke is certainly going to be a little bit more of a fade fashion with that left arm a little bit more connected to the body. And we're going to see us collect the golf club in a little bit more position, and we're going to see our better chippers and pitchers of the golf ball. So pivot work, club in a little bit more of a vertical position in backstroke, a little bit of a fade bias in the downstroke without letting that left arm and the right arm get super long off the body. Work on that, shoot me some videos so we can check on it, make sure that you're on track, man.